Our first speaker for the evening is Khushee Doshi, and she's working on her Pathways Leadership, Dynamic Leadership, Understanding Your Communication Style. In this speech, she will be discussing my predominant style of communication, which is the initiating style. Through imparting the essence of impactful communication, I intend to establish the significance of employing avid listening skills in order to promote dynamism between interlocutors or between speaker and their audience. The title of her speech is, Have You Listened? Embodying Listening to Facilitate Dynamic Communication. Let's welcome Khushee Doshi.
Good evening, fellow Toastmasters. First of all, I would like to ask you all a question. Have you ever found yourself to be in a conversation with a person? When you are speaking, you find themselves to be rather consumed by a distraction or a source of distraction? Or on the contrary, have you ever found yourself to be distracted or consumed by a source of distraction while someone else is speaking? If your answer to either of those questions was yes, it is most likely that that conversation was incomplete and inefficient. And that is the power of listening. Listening is a major component of dynamic communication. It comprises of 50% of communication, which is what makes any communication efficient and complete. Listening is often in today's world the missing half of a conversation. It is necessary but often overlooked. And in an age where we as humans are more interconnected than ever before, through the various sources and resources we have at hand in the form of technology, social media, and the internet, it is easier for us now more than ever to put our voices out into the world and to have other people listen to us, which makes us think that the thoughts and perspectives that we are putting out into the world are acknowledged by everyone, and everyone out there is listening to us. And because there are so many people across the world putting their thoughts out into the public, it is inevitable that there are various forms of communicators globally. And within those categories, the four main types of communicators that we often tend to see people put themselves into labels are direct communicators, supportive communicators, analytical communicators, and initiating communicators. And when I took a communicator, what type of communicator are you quiz, a lot of various mediums gave me the response that I was an initiating communicator. I tend to be sociable, gregarious, spontaneous when I speak, but that nature of my communication can also intimidate people at times and can also make them think that I talk more than I listen. I was very shocked at that because I didn't want to be that communicator who would always talk and not listen. Because I really value the essence of being a servant leader, and what a servant leader does is a servant leader acknowledges everyone who is around them, listens to their voice, and makes changes accordingly, according to the needs of those around them. And when I watched a TED Talk this morning that was called The Power of Listening, it really opened up my eyes because it showed me the importance and significance of listening in shaping a dynamic conversation and a dynamic communication between interlocutors in a discussion or between a speaker and their audience. And when you listen to someone, you really open up various different avenues through which others can reciprocate that attentiveness to you when you are speaking. So try to listen to others in order to have yourself heard when you really need to put your voice out there. And the sources that I told you, internet, social media, technology, that serve as a boon to us in today's world to get our voices out into the world, are also a source of impediment when it comes to conversations, because those are what consume you. Those are what serve as a source of distraction. For instance, I have several times found myself to be in parts of group conversations where I see people, or I even catch myself looking at my phone when someone else is saying something, just because I finished my talking, I finished the points that I needed to get across. That doesn't mean that that conversation is complete right there when I finish speaking. In fact, it's only 50% complete when I finish speaking. The 50% is completed when I finish listening to those around me, because that is what expands my knowledge. That is what equips me with the resources to be an effective and more dynamic communicator in the forthcoming. And that is what allows me to grow upon as a leader and as a communicator. Now, how do we inculcate the art of listening to others while we are in a conversation? It is difficult and it takes time and practice, just like everything takes time and practice. The art of listening to develop also takes a lot of time, patience, and practice. First, we need to learn how to communicate with ourselves internally in order to perfect and master the art of listening. I don't know if anyone remembers, but 2 weeks ago when Mano delivered a speech, he talked about the art of journaling and how journaling has improved his self-growth and has allowed him to expand as a human being. I think we can all start inculcating the aspect of journaling because it allows us to talk to ourselves. If we only take 10 to 15 minutes a day to write down our thoughts and to really understand what we value the most and what our internal values are, we can become more effective listeners of our internal and external environments. And that will allow us to become more efficient communicators with our internal space and the external space, because our mind oftentimes is occupied by various unwanted things. But when we empty those down on a physical source, our mind is more conducive and accepting of everything that is around us, and it allows us to absorb what others have to say more effectively. Thank you.
Wow, thank you very much, Mr. General Evaluator. And thank you, Miss Khushee. Smile, Khushee. You were so extremely good tonight. I cannot tell you, I was thrilled by the presentation that you gave. Why? Because it was well planned, it was well delivered, you had your eyes on the camera, you had a complete ideas, and you threw out some really interesting ideas during the course of your speech. I love the fact that you brought in, during the portion on listening, you referred to Mano and his presentation of 2 or 3 weeks ago on journaling. Really, really good. It shows that you were listening 3 weeks ago, and I think most of us remembered Mano's speech as well. I like the fact that you tied dynamic leadership into this concept of listening and being able to become a better initiator by developing skills in listening. You talked about the 3 things that are needed: time, patience, and practice. And they were ideas that were extremely well taken. There are a couple of things in my opinion that might have made the speech even a little bit better. When you start with a question, you started with the question of how many of you have ever been distracted while trying to conduct a conversation with one person, and how many of you have felt that the other person was distracted by this. When you ask a question like that, I think you're better off if you ask people to raise their hands. Once they raise their hand, then we know that they're listening. They know that they're paying attention. Start by asking, please raise your hands if you've ever found yourself in this situation. The second thing that I wanted to talk about was your use of gestures. And in the Zoom world, the problem with gestures is that they're up here. And a lot of your gestures were down below, and all we saw was a flash of hands at the bottom of the screen. At one point, I did notice kind of a claw hand come across. Pay attention to how you want your gestures to best help you and get your points across. Use the gestures with the intent of making them work for you. Nevertheless, I thought you looked every bit a professional speaker. You delivered wonderful information, and it was very extremely well prepared tonight. Nicely done, Khushee. Mr. General Evaluator.